All right, for more on this story, we are joined now by Giorgio Cafiero. He's the CEO of Gulf State Analytics and adjunct assistant professor at Georgetown University. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Professor. So apparently the Israeli team has been sent to Doha without much negotiating power, but Trump is still claiming that we may see a deal done this week. So what is really going on here, and how likely is it that the bombs do actually stop dropping?
Yeah, thanks for having me on your program tonight. Good to be with you. So, as you mentioned, we did not get across the line in the talks in Doha, but I do think that when Netanyahu is visiting Trump in the White House this week, this might be a time in which we do have a deal of some sort come across the line. You know, Trump has not really had any success in terms of achieving some big deal in Ukraine or a new nuclear deal with Iran. And Trump is always focused on trying to present himself as the deal maker of deal makers, you know, the world's greatest deal maker. And I think it's possible that this week, when Netanyahu is in Washington, Trump will have an opportunity to sort of create the optics of bringing peace to Gaza. Of course, I think what might come out of this week with Netanyahu's visit will be some sort of an arrangement that ultimately proves to be very temporary, really some sort of a hostage swap arrangement rather than a lasting ceasefire. But with Donald Trump, you know, what really matters to him are the optics. And I think that there's a good chance that some sort of an agreement will come this week.
With Trump really wanting, at least, to have that peacemaker persona, is it possible that we will see him lay down the law with Benjamin Netanyahu in ways that he has not done yet?
I'm quite skeptical, and I think many people who have been paying close attention to how the Trump administration has been dealing not only with the situation in Gaza, but also the situation in Lebanon, situation in Iran as well, are skeptical too. The Trump administration, I think, is really focused on headlines and pushing this narrative about Trump being a peacemaker, a deal maker. But we never really see the Trump administration keep pressure on Israel. And I'm sure, as all your viewers know so well, the deal, the ceasefire deal that came into effect at the beginning of Trump's second term, it unraveled in March. Israel completely collapsed that ceasefire. Trump administration put no pressure on Israel to continue abiding by the ceasefire. At this point, would the Trump administration start putting pressure on Israel to abide by a ceasefire for sort of a longer period of time? You know, I would certainly like to see that happen, but I am quite skeptical about that happening.
Yeah. On the other end of the deal is, of course, Hamas. They had amendments to the ceasefire proposal, despite giving it or receiving it positively, I should say. How much negotiating power do you think that they have right now? Because they are not just negotiating for a ceasefire anymore, as you're talking about. Maybe they were in, for example, December, the last time these negotiations happened. But they're also negotiating for example, a ceasefire from organizations like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They're now insisting, Hamas is, that the UN be the one to deliver the aid amidst these increasing attacks on aid seekers. How much power do they have in the negotiations right now?
I don't think there's any denying the fact that Hamas is the weaker party here. It seems to me that the Israeli hostages who are being held in Gaza, this is really sort of the last piece of leverage that Hamas really has at this point. Hamas does not really have many great options right now. And I also have to say that if we're going to try to see this from Hamas's standpoint, if we're going to put ourselves in Hamas's shoes for a moment, I think there's really good reason for the organization to doubt the sincerity of U.S. guarantees when it comes to this talk about the possible permanent end of the war in the Israeli war on Gaza. You know, when we look at the track record here, it's not great. Israel tends to not really abide by ceasefires. We can ask people in Lebanon who have been experiencing life since November, when Israel and Hezbollah entered into a ceasefire under U.S. and French auspices. Since that deal was reached in November, Israel has continued bombing Lebanon all the time. So any sort of deal between Hamas and Israel, in which it's really sort of through kind of U.S. mediation, even with the help from Qataris and Egyptians, I don't think Hamas really has much reason to expect any sort of deal to last longer than Israel wants it to. Again, unless there is actual U.S. pressure on Israel. And I don't think there's really any reason to expect that kind of pressure to come, to be honest with you.
Certainly a lot of doubt in this part of the world about the U.S.'s ability to really mediate these conflicts. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us tonight.